So this head is on and torqued. When I put it in, this line here couldn't get the head in there properly with the studs, as it had to slide down. So with the head bolts, you could pull this down and get it out from underneath that line. So I end up having to move this line out over here. Whoops, get my camera the right direction. So I forced this line over here, but now it won't go back in here. So since I was pulling the 3 turbo pedestal, turbo bracket bolts, whatever, they're down there in the bottom. That one's out. One over there you can see on the other side's out, and that one there's out. Plan was to pull them out anyways. Got them schmooed up, so focus. So I got some anti-seize on those. So I just lifted the turbo just enough to get this line to slide back in place there. It's going to hold on with that bolt right there. So yeah, that's how I got around that with the head stud thing. It's that, or I mean, the turbo has to come out of the way, or this line has to completely come off, which it's mounted down there, and then it goes around the other side of the turbo and feeds off. If that's going to focus right there. So that's what I did to get that in, because it wouldn't work with the head studs. So one way around it instead of pulling that line off, I guess. Either way would have been just as easy, but since I wanted anti-seize on these anyway in case I ever have to do a turbo, then now put that back on, if it would focus, and put those back in, torque them up, and look up some torque specs for those again, since I pulled them out, but I don't want them rusting, so they were not very tight. Had a little 3/8 drive ratchet, and it didn't take much of a pull, so we'll, I'm guessing they're probably at 28 to 30 pounds, 35 pounds at most, maybe. But we'll look her up and so we got those done. Oh, there you go. Torqued up. The torque spec said 80 pounds, so I torqued them down to 80 foot-pounds. Next thing, I got this sitting on here, and it's got the one shorter bolt, but it's not shorter enough. Not sure why. So I'm gonna have to go back and find the one old used bolt and throw it back in there, because this one here, it bottoms out before it runs out of bolt. I'd either put 3 washers in there, which I may do that, I guess, and I'd have all new bolts, but this one here is too long. So, and like I say, it looks sort of like that when it, let's see that, it looks sort of like that when it's bottomed out. This one here's not bottomed out yet, I don't think. Oops, going the wrong way. So I had that one there in there, I just pulled it back out, and it's, like I say, it looks like it's bottomed out. This is a brand new bolt kit from ARP. So this is what I got. This here's the manifold to up-pipe bolts, but it's Merchant Automotive, and it says it's ARP exhaust manifold. I already threw the bag away for the manifold to head, but it's over here, and I think it's a little faded. But so for the LML, ARP exhaust manifold to cylinder head bolt kit. So anyway, that one there, like I say, it's too long. I'm gonna go grab an extra washer or 2 washers, throw it in there. I think it'll tighten up and it'll probably work just fine. Otherwise, I have to go find, actually I guess I could cut it off too. Probably a super hard bolt. If I could cut a little piece off of it, fix the threads up, would probably work, unless it's bottoming out up here on the top. Nope, it doesn't look like it. Come on, focus cam. Okay, well, let's lay it down here. So I can see right there, I got about 5 thread left at the top. So I'm not running out of thread, it's actually just bottoming out in the hole. So that'll be the next thing to try to figure out. Come on. Figure out what's going on there. I'll make sure the hole's clean again, poke something down in there, measure it, and make sure that's actually what's happening, not just hitting some dirt. But I do have thread left, it just is bottoming out somehow, and it's tightening up before the washer is squished. So both sides on. I put the silicone on the intake manifold side, and then slid it on there, set it in place, put the bolts in hand tight, so everything is touching, the glue is touching both sides of it. Then I left it like that for about, well, it's been about 2 hours now. and so it was pressing on the glue, it was sticking to both sides, and then now I just went and torqued them all. These are 18 pounds, down there is 28 pounds for the exhaust manifolds, so those are all torqued up. And we're ready to put some head studs in the other side of the engine and put this head on. Driver's side heads on, all torqued up. Again, 125 pounds the main studs, 25 pounds on the little ones up there. And yeah, all torqued up, greased up good, so torqued up nice, ready for push rods and then the rocker shafts. So that's the next project. So valve bridges on, cleaned all them up with just a rag, put grease on the inside where it goes onto the valve, and greased the top of the little wear plate. Focus, 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 there we go. 12,000, if it'll focus, there we go, look at that. Can even see it. Setting up the valves, yeah, torque them down since I greased all my push rods and stuff, top and bottom, so there's some grease in there. So what I'm doing to kind of counteract that, any added tension that I might have from that, is I torque this down, push this valve a little bit on both of these, push these both valves down a bit, put some pressure on it so it'll squeeze any extra grease out of the cups here in the bottom and in the cam followers. Get that grease pushed out, and then I'll back this off, get me some slack, and then I'll stick my feeler gauge in there and adjust them. So one way to make sure I got the grease out and I'm not having to redo valves here. In an earlier video, before this all disappears, I said that I put the grease or the silicone in there first, pressed it down so it stuck to both sides, and then torqued it about an hour or so later. If you look at this right here and this one right here, that's why. I get it to stick to both sides and let it kind of set up, and then I torque it down so that it's got a good little layer of schmoo in there. If you don't like doing it, don't do it. That's the way I did it. And I thought it would make sure it's good and adhered to both sides, and you can see the extra smushes out once you torque it. So that's why I did it. So I got this one set, just trying to show you. Before I move on to the next one, after I get it set, nuts are locked down. And I'll stick my feeler gauge back in just to make sure I didn't get her too tight, because a couple of them I've been like, oh, that's too tight, and then I go back and redo it. But so down there is good. It slides in just a nice little bit of tension, so I'll call that good. Both of them ready to move on to the next one. Go turn the engine and go do the next one. Parts saga. You can see in there it looks like, yeah, it's all painted still. Let's see this one here. You can see over here on the side, the come on, focus on the bottom. It looks like this here's already clear metal over here, but actually the clear metal looks like that. So you brush it, it kind of brushes the orange off, leaves you this color here, and then it blackens it, if I can twist that, like this side, and come on, focus. Blackens it like that, and it looks like, oh yeah, you're down to the metal, but then you actually still have to scrape that off there, because that Dremel seems to have a terrible time getting right down to the metal. So you Dremel it for a little while, then you scrape it, and then you can Dremel it again, and it just is a pretty big deal. Right there, you can see it perfectly. See, that looks like metal, but by the time I get in there with the knife, it's just blackened the paint a bit from rubbing on it, and then it's, or the powder coat, and now it's ready for some scraping with a knife or a screwdriver or whatever have you. So big job. Gotta get these all cleaned up. The other thing is, I've got these holes here where we focus right there, where the little wear plate sits for the injector hold down arm there. So I'm gonna try one injector and see if everything's gonna fit without taking the paint off, just by putting the hold down in there, because I can drive them in with a hammer and they do go in. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how it goes. But if the injector fits, then I won't take the paint off. If it doesn't, just don't. If it doesn't hold the injector down properly, then I will have to buff a little spot here, take this down to metal, and then put the injector hole or wear plate in there so that it's sitting at the same level. but I don't know if it's going to make a difference being up a little bit more. It's just going to push down a little bit harder with the same amount of torque. I just got to make sure there's enough wiggle room in the injector hold down fork when it's sitting in there. If it has room to tilt, then it should be fine. So we'll see how that goes. What you working on? Are you cleaning? Good job. Got this all cleaned up. You can see down in there. Got that scraped down to bare metal again, aluminum. The tube is all cleaned. Then I went and did a little bit of actual measuring that I probably should have done right away. And this is the size of the injector. Oops. So the injector sits in there flopping loose. Has no connection to this piece, so I could have left all that paint in there just peachily. And probably would never have had an issue with it. So anyway, wasted many hours just by not checking it and thinking that it was tight in there because of the O-ring, but apparently the O-ring goes past this and down into the head is where the O-ring seals, so it's sticking past this. Oh well, it's clean now. Guess it's got lots of room for dirt to fill.